Imagine losing your entire life every single time a drop of rain falls from the sky. Zhen suffers from a terrifying condition. Whenever a rainstorm hits, her memory forcefully resets to exactly 1 year ago. She is trapped in a devastating loop, desperate to remember the mysterious promise she made to a man in her past. But her broken reality gets dangerously complicated when she meets Jiang An. He is a cold, devastatingly handsome bookstore owner who watches her every single move. He is full of dark secrets, yet he constantly shields her with his red umbrella. The chilling part? He looks exactly like the man from her forgotten past. Is he her silent protector, or the seductive mastermind who broke her mind? This is Rainstorm syndrome. Rain pours over the city, and with it, the memories flood back. Zhen remembers tracing words backwards on a misty window pane, a secret message just for him. She can almost feel the blush that came with admitting she was partial to his heart. The echo of her own voice shouting her love on a crowded train returns, just as she recalls his quiet reply, that her voice was as sweet as a kiss. A vision of him offering his umbrella surfaces, his voice urging her to come closer. Lost in the warmth of the past, a faint, knowing smile touches her lips. The warmth of the memory fades as the cold rain continues to fall. Zhen rushes out of her apartment, a single thought echoing in her mind. Even if nothing makes sense, she just wants to spend her time with him. But the world outside is a torrent. Her foot lands in a deep puddle, and she groans in frustration. The broadcast had promised a sunny day. Now, stuck in traffic and running late, she grips her umbrella tightly, her face flushed as she navigates the downpour, blaming the driver for the delay. A harsh cough escapes Zhen as she finally reaches her destination, a bookstore. A wave of confusion washes over her. She was certain it was a cafe. Her hands tremble, fumbling for her phone with a desperate thought to let him know she's here. But as her fingers hover over the screen, her mind draws a blank. A single tear falls as she struggles to remember who she was even meeting. Just then, the door chimes open, and a calm, familiar voice cuts through the rain. "Welcome," Jiang An says, his gaze meeting hers. A flustered employee complains that the weirdo is back again, urging his boss to send her away. Confused, Zhen insists this is a cafe, but the employee explains it closed 6 months ago. Before she can process his words, Jiang An moves past her, his presence commanding the space. An overwhelming feeling of familiarity compels her to reach out, her fingers brushing against his sleeve. He stops and turns, his intense gaze locking onto hers. The world around them melts away as she whispers, "Have we met before?" Jiang An gently pulls his hand away, his voice cool and distant as he tells her she has the wrong person. Still, Zhen insists, her own voice full of desperate hope, explaining how familiar he looks. But Jiang An remains firm, stating he has no reason to lie. As she finally apologizes, defeated, a sudden, violent crack of thunder splits the air. The bright flash of lightning illuminates the room, and Zhen's body gives way, collapsing forward. In an instant, Jiang An's cold demeanor shatters. He lunges, catching her securely in his arms. "It's okay," he whispers, holding her tight. "I'm here." The warmth of his arms envelopes her, his quiet words a promise of safety. Suddenly, reality floods back, and a blush crawls up her neck. Zhen quickly pulls away, stumbling back with a flustered apology. "Are you all right?" Jiang An asks, his expression unreadable. She insists she's fine, just a little scared of thunder. He gently advises her against going out in the rain if she's so afraid. Mortified, she apologizes for the trouble and turns to go, but his voice stops her. "That little umbrella of yours won't block the rain." Jiang An extends a sturdy-looking umbrella. "Take this," he says, his voice low. Zhen turns, her amber-brown eyes wide with surprise. His intense gaze meets hers for a silent, charged moment before he turns away. "It's all right now. You can go." She leaves, and he immediately moves to the window, tracking her every step as she waits at the crosswalk. Another brilliant flash of lightning illuminates the rain-soaked street, and he sees her cry out in fear. The memory of catching her just moments ago floods his mind, the feeling of her collapsing against him. A memory flashes through Jiang An's mind, the two of them, close together. His voice murmurs with concern, asking how she'll cope with her fear of thunder when he isn't around. Her reply rings in his ears, a heartfelt wish for him to stay by her side forever. The vision dissolves, leaving him with a somber expression. Back in the bookstore, his employee asks if he knows Zhen. Jiang An's face remains a cold mask. "I don't know her," he says flatly. "There's nothing between us." Outside, they stand on opposite sides of a crosswalk, separated by the post, yet only inches apart. The lock gives a soft click as the apartment door swings inward. Rainwater pools on the floor from the visitor's shoes, marking his silent entry. Inside, the room is still. Zhen lies motionless on the couch, having collapsed there just moments before. Her long, dark hair fans out across the plaid cushions, a remote resting near her slack hand. The quiet is heavy and tense, broken only by a single, electronic beep that echoes from a screen somewhere in the dim apartment. He stands there, simply watching over her. A memory, vivid and warm, flashes behind her closed eyes. A sunlit embrace, two figures drawn together. Zhen's own eyes flutter open, a deep blush spreading across her cheeks as the real world rushes back. Geez, her heart thumps against her ribs. Why did she suddenly hug him? She buries her face into the cushion, mortified, convinced she can never show her face in that bookstore again. Pushing herself up, a new sensation cuts through the haze. A delicate fragrance hangs in the still air. She takes a slow breath in. That smell, is it roses? Zhen clutches the pillow tighter, her eyes squeezed shut. A thought surfaces through the haze. The cleaner she bought last time was supposed to smell like jasmine. This is different. She pushes herself up, standing in the middle of her apartment. Everything is where it should be. The furniture and layout all familiar, but a strange feeling settles over her. It's as if an invisible layer of dust coats every surface, casting a subtle wrongness over the room. The sensation is like writing a word over and over, until suddenly, it no longer looks real. Her eyes scan the room, piecing together unsettling clues. She touches the wall, feeling the faint outline where a picture once hung. On the counter, a single mug sits where a pair should be. This familiar apartment suddenly feels like a stranger's home. A warm memory cuts through the fog. A man's gentle smile, his hand stroking her hair. The sensation is so vivid it makes her gasp, her chest tightening. Her gaze finds the TV. A weather anchor who looks exactly like her announces the current date, May 25th, 2014. Her eyes widen in shock. The year 2014 flashes across the screen, sending a jolt through Zhen. She stumbles backward, her mind reeling. Scrambling for her phone on the coffee table, she clutches it, her fingers trembling as she wakes the screen. The date is a stark confirmation, May 26th, 2014. It's impossible. She's certain yesterday was in 2013. A sudden realization cuts through the haze. She remembers something, a clue. A new resolve fills her eyes as she pushes herself to her feet and strides purposefully toward her desk. She must find it. A powerful instinct guides Zhen to a black journal on her shelf. Her fingers fly across the pages, a frantic pulse beating in her throat as she searches for an answer she left for herself. She finds it, a message written in her own hand. Zhen, if you've forgotten again, start here. The warmth of a memory brushes against her, but the next words are ice cold. You have Rainstorm syndrome. A voice whispers through the fog, explaining that every time it rains, she's sent back to that one promised day in 2013. Zhen's heart pounds as she reads the frantic scrawl of her own handwriting. The word amnesia hits her with the force of a physical blow. The journal entries chronicle a terrifying loop, waking up to find months have vanished and receiving a doctor's grim diagnosis. Her past self writes of missing diaries from 2011 to 2013, convinced the answers are hidden within them. A cold dread washes over her as she reads the final, desperate entry, questioning if she's doomed to be trapped in this looping rainy season forever. The ink on the page bleeds into a vivid memory from April 2nd, the day her past self found a clue. In the pouring rain, she is on the cold, wet ground when a man shields her from the downpour. Even then, he felt deeply familiar, and she was certain he knew her. Her eyes fly across the frantic scrawl asking, "Who is that person?" The answer stares back, a name that makes her heart stop. Jiang An bookstore. Her breath hitches as a realization dawns. So we really have met before? Zhen sleeps at her desk, surrounded by a chaotic flurry of notes. Questions about a missing diary and a faded photograph fill the papers, but one name stands out. Jiang An. Why pretend you don't know me? A note asks. Later, sunlight filters through lush green leaves as she walks with purpose. She presses herself against a brick wall, peering around the corner with wide, cautious eyes. Her gaze is fixed, her breath held, as she watches from the shadows, determined to uncover the truth he seems to be hiding. Through the window, her gaze locks onto Jiang An. He stands near the counter, his sharp, grayish eyes fixed in her direction. A silent heat builds between them, a current of unspoken questions. Taking a breath, Zhen pushes the door, and a delicate chime announces her arrival. Another employee turns to greet her, but she interrupts with a dazzling, slightly forced smile. She offers a bright apology for her strange behavior the day before, asking if she had startled him. All the while, she can feel Jiang An's unwavering stare. The employee stammers, asking if she's here to see the boss. With a practiced smile, Zhen deflects, asking for a novel instead. As the clerk eagerly leads her toward the shelves, Jiang An watches them from afar, a silent, intense observer. She compliments the thriving plants, and the employee mentions the shop has only been open for half a year. The timeline clicks in her mind, the same time her memory issues began. A jolt runs through her. Hiding her discovery, she turns to the clerk. "Actually," she begins, "your boss saved me once before." The employee's jaw drops. He's never heard this story before, but leans in conspiratorially, revealing he thinks Jiang An used to be a police officer. The information hangs in the air, a new piece of the puzzle for Zhen. She immediately asks why he would quit, but the clerk just shrugs. It's a secret Jiang An refuses to share. A thoughtful expression crosses Zhen's face. "What kind of person is he?" she asks, her voice low. The clerk's eyes sparkle as he gushes about a kind, dependable man, completely at odds with her own tense encounters. The employee gushes that with Jiang An around, even the biggest problems don't feel scary. A sudden realization dawns on Zhen, and she points accusingly. "Wait, you don't have a crush on him, do you?" The employee flails, denying it frantically, but the commotion draws unwanted attention. From the end of the aisle, Jiang An emerges, his gaze locking with Zhen's. The air crackles with an unseen energy. Startled by his sudden appearance, she stumbles backward and trips. A tense, embarrassed silence falls as they both look away, cheeks flushed. From behind a shelf, Jiang An's thoughts are a battlefield. He wonders why she hasn't come to talk to him, but another part of him screams that she shouldn't even be in the bookstore. His heart thumps with a conflicted rhythm. Stealing his expression, he grabs a stack of books and strides past Zhen without a single glance. He stops abruptly and commands his employee, "Zhou, organize the stockroom. Finish it by the end of today." The order is sharp, a wall of ice erected between himself and the woman he can't face. As the employee shuffles away, a heavy silence settles between Zhen and Jiang An. Determined, Zhen walks to the counter, holding a book up like a shield. "I'd like to buy this. Thank you," she says, her voice steady despite the frantic questions racing through her mind. He takes it without meeting her eyes, the air crackling with unspoken tension. Searching for a way to break his icy demeanor, she gestures to the greenery. "Your plants are so well kept." "I don't do anything special," he replies, his voice flat. Her gaze then lands on a jar of sweets, and she tries again. "Do you like chocolate?" A hopeful smile lights up Zhen's face. She offers to bring him Belgian chocolate as a thank you, but the warmth is shattered by his cold reply. "I don't need it." The hope in her eyes dims, replaced by confusion. He's nothing like the considerate person Zhou described. Defeated, she murmurs an apology for bothering him. Suddenly, Zhou calls out, needing the stockroom key. The heavy silence breaks as Jiang An turns away, handing the keys to his employee with a stern warning, "Don't lose it." Sunlight pours into the busy lobby as Zhen holds the elevator door for a colleague rushing to catch it. The woman dashes inside, offering a bright "Morning, Zhen." Zhen returns the greeting, her expression calm and placid. Soon after, she sits at her desk, her gaze distant and thoughtful. Her chin rests on her hand as she mentally catalogs the details of the new co-worker from the news department, Zhang Wei. She recalls the short hair, the distinctive mole near her eye, and her role with the evening news. The air in the studio crackles with a frenetic energy that makes her skin tingle. A colleague, Li Feng, rushes toward her with a hurried warning about a broken camera. Zhen's mind works quickly, slotting his face and name into place from her careful mental notes. A soft warmth spreads through her as she offers a calm, professional smile that feels both genuine and practiced. "Thanks, brotherly," she replies, her voice smooth and steady. She turns away, the warmth lingering as she navigates the controlled chaos of the news floor. Lost in thought at her desk, Zhen flinches when a voice cuts through the silence. A blond man leans over her chair, a warm coffee in hand. He calls it her lifesaver, reciting her exact order. The sudden closeness makes her heart race. She protests that he walks too quietly, but he just smiles, teasing that she was simply too distracted to notice him. The air grows thick as he leans in, his playful tone vanishing. He brings up the recent thunderstorm, and his hand lands on her shoulder. "Are you okay?" he asks, his gaze intense. A gentle hand rests on Yizhen's shoulder, a silent question from her blonde colleague, the only one at work who knows her secret. Yizhen's eyes are distant as she describes the aftermath of the rain as the usual chaotic dream. Her grip tightens on her coffee cup as a familiar ache rises. She admits she always feels like she made plans with someone she can't remember. Her friend's voice is soft, telling her to let it go. But a haunting image of a man's back surrounded by leaves fills her mind, a promise she can't forsake. "I feel like I'm close to finding that person," Yizhen says, her voice barely a whisper. Suddenly, her coffee cup slips, clattering onto the desk and spilling everywhere. Her colleague, Jiang An, jumps back, apologizing for being clumsy. But Yizhen's attention is no longer on the mess. Her eyes fix on him with sharp intensity. "Jiang An," she says, her tone serious. "You know something, don't you?" He avoids her gaze, the silence stretching between them. His hand gently covers hers before he suggests the person she seeks might be an ex-boyfriend, leaving her completely stunned. Yizhen's mind spins. Ex-boyfriend. The words feel impossible. She frantically insists she has no memory of ever having one. Jiang An counters that it was 2 years ago, arguing her amnesia is the very reason she can't recall him. His intensity builds as he lays out his theory, questioning why a healthy person would suddenly lose their memories, and why a partner would vanish at the exact same time. He points dramatically, declaring that this ex-boyfriend is the very cause of her suffering, leaving her after a terrible betrayal. Yizhen presses her colleague for details. What was his name? What did he look like? Her friend admits she never saw him, explaining that Yizhen always said he was too busy. A sudden warmth spreads through Yizhen's chest, a new lead, however unsettling. Her friend's hand gently touches her forehead, urging her to forget the man and live her life. But Yizhen is lost in thought, the possibility of a forgotten past taking hold. Her colleague tries to break the spell, inviting her to a mixer, but Yizhen just leans back, completely drained. With a mischievous grin, Yizhen's colleague grabs her, declaring she's dragging her out for a night of fun. "Wait," Yizhen protests, but she's pulled away regardless. Her friend insists the best way to forget an old love is to find a new one. Soon, they're in a loud, crowded restaurant, the air thick with chatter and the clinking of glasses. Surrounded by strangers, Yizhen feels completely out of her element. She holds her drink tightly, her posture stiff. Meanwhile, Jiang An is also being led into the very same restaurant by an enthusiastic employee. A cool shadow suddenly falls over Yizhen. She looks up to find Jiang An standing directly behind her, his presence instantly changing the room's atmosphere. His expression is unreadable and intense as he stares ahead, his hand resting protectively on the back of her chair. Yizhen's eyes widen in surprise, her heart starting to beat a little faster at his sudden, silent arrival. The noisy chatter from moments before dies down, replaced by a thick, palpable tension that hangs heavy in the air between them. The heavy silence shatters when a cheerful voice calls out, "Hey, it's Missy." A friendly man waves enthusiastically from across the room, his surprised friend beside him. Yizhen's companion smirks, teasing her about meeting more handsome men. The group insists they join their mixer, their energy infectious. Despite some hesitation, they are pulled over to the crowded table. The quiet intensity from moments before dissolves into lively chatter as another woman spots one of the men, calling him over and adding to the cheerful chaos. The group settles in, and the lively atmosphere warms with the clinking of glasses. A cheerful, white-haired man asks Yizhen if he can drop the formalities and call her by her first name. She agrees, and he erupts in pure joy, much to his friend's visible annoyance. The brief moment of levity is cut short as Yizhen's companion pivots, a knowing smirk on her lips. She directs a pointed question across the table, asking Jiang An if he often visits trendy places like this one, putting him directly in the spotlight. The air crackles as the pointed question hangs between them. Jiang An offers a single, dismissive word in reply. Nothing. He calmly lifts a piece of food to his lips, utterly unfazed by the intense scrutiny. His white-haired friend slumps, visibly frustrated by the missed social cue. Suddenly, Yizhen's companion throws a playful arm around her shoulders, raising a glass high. "Let's all have a drink," she cheers. Yizhen hesitates, admitting she doesn't drink, but her friend just scoffs, teasingly reminding her that no one can outlast her. Before Yizhen can be pressured further, a hand swoops in, plucking the glass from her grasp. "It's Jiang An, I'll drink for her," he declares, his voice cutting through the table's chatter. The others erupt in cheers at his bold move. He rises to his full height, downs the liquid in one decisive motion, and sets the empty glass down with a thud. Yizhen gazes up at him, completely stunned. He looms over her, his expression unreadable, and the air around them suddenly feels charged, thick with an unspoken heat that makes her breath catch. The bravado lasts only a moment before Jiang An collapses, slumping face first onto the table. His friends erupt in panic, one wailing that his boss is a complete lightweight. While they bicker, Yizhen's friend winks, suggesting it's Yizhen's duty to see him home. As Yizhen starts to pull away, a firm hand suddenly clasps hers, stopping her cold. It's Jiang An. Though seemingly unconscious, his grip is tight as he murmurs a quiet plea. "Don't go." Yizhen freezes, her breath caught in her throat, stunned by the unexpected warmth spreading from his touch. With a soft sigh, Yizhen accepts her fate, a sliver of curiosity blooming within her. This could be an opportunity. She supports Jiang An's heavy, unsteady frame as they make their way to his apartment. Once inside, she struggles to get him settled, finally heaving him onto the couch with a grunt. "You lie down," she pants, trying to free her hand from his grasp. "I'll get some water." Before she can take a step, he pulls her down sharply. Yizhen gasps, tumbling over him. His grip tightens around her hand, trapping her. The sudden shift leaves her breathless, her heart pounding in the charged silence. The couch cushions dip as Jiang An shifts, his weight pinning Yizhen beneath him. A startled gasp escapes her. Her eyes are wide with shock as she finds herself trapped, face inches from his. He gazes down, his usual coldness replaced by a heavy-lidded intensity and a faint, knowing smile. A low whisper brushes against her ear. "You," he murmurs, his voice thick with a strange emotion. "You're finally back." The words hang in the air, sending a dizzying wave through her as the world fades into a surreal, sparkling haze. With a sudden move, Jiang An pins Yizhen against the couch, his body hovering over hers. A deep blush warms Yizhen's face as his fingers gently cup the side of her neck, the unexpected closeness making her breath catch. He leans down, his expression full of a powerful longing as he whispers how much he's missed her. The words jolt her back to reality. Panicked, Yizhen shoves hard against his chest, her voice trembling as she insists, "You've got the wrong person." The air between them crackles with confusion and intense emotion. Her heart thumps wildly against her ribs. Despite her protests, Jiang An's intense gaze softens, a deep blush warming his cheeks. He leans down, closing the final inch between them until the world narrows to a single, breathless moment. A wave of shock washes over Yizhen, her eyes wide as her hand clenches the fabric of the couch. He pulls back with a sharp gasp, his own hand tightening into a fist, leaving a thick, heated silence hanging in the air as Yizhen lies stunned beneath him. The heated moment shatters as Jiang An's body goes limp, and he collapses onto the couch. Yizhen freezes, a wave of pure shock washing over her. "That scared me to death," she thinks, her heart hammering against her ribs. She stands over his unconscious form, hands on her hips, completely bewildered. Just then, her phone rings. It's his subordinate, practically begging her. "Miss Yi, please. My girlfriend's blowing up my phone. The boss is in your hands now." Before she can protest or even ask for an address, he hangs up and runs off, leaving her stranded. A warm flush creeps up Yizhen's neck as she tries to rouse the unconscious man. "Boss Jiang, wake up," she murmurs, offering him water to sober him up. With a determined breath, she wraps an arm around his shoulders, his entire weight pressing against her slender frame. "Here, I'll help you up." She struggles forward, their bodies close. As they stumble, a set of keys with a small, wooden charm slips from his pocket, clinking softly onto the floor. She freezes, her gaze drawn to the familiar shape as she reaches for it. Yizhen holds out the familiar wooden charm dangling from the keys. "Your key," she says, her voice barely a whisper. Suddenly, Jiang An snatches them from her grasp. He pulls himself closer, his gaze intense despite his state. He mumbles that she was the one who gave it to him, insisting he never thought it was ugly. Leaning in until their faces are mere inches apart, he softly says, "Thank you for the gift you made with your own hands." A wave of shock washes over Zhen, her eyes wide. How could it be? Zhen's mind whirls, thoughts colliding in a dizzying storm. Fragments of memory surface. A bitter label, a bookstore's business card, the raw frustration of him pretending not to know her. Could it be? The heat between them is palpable as she leans closer, her voice a soft probe. "Have you ever had a girlfriend?" she asks. A deep blush spreads across Jiang An's face. He looks away, quietly murmuring, "No." A small breath of relief escapes her. Right, it's impossible. How could there be such a coincidence? But doubt lingers in her eyes. A playful smile touches Zhen's lips as she teases him, surprised that a man like him has never had a girlfriend. The light atmosphere shatters in an instant. Jiang An grabs her wrist, pulling her off balance and down onto the sofa with him. He holds her tightly, his breath warm as he buries his face in her hair. His voice is a low, earnest whisper, confessing there's no one else. "It's always only been you," he murmurs. Zhen lies frozen in his arms, her heart pounding as his impossible words echo in her mind. Morning light filters into the room, casting a warm glow over the quiet scene. Jiang An is already awake, his gaze soft as he watches Zhen sleeping soundly in his arms on the sofa. She stirs, her hand lifting to rub the sleep from her eyes. "What time is it?" she murmurs, her voice a sleepy whisper. "You're up so early." A moment of stillness hangs in the air before her eyes snap open wide. The memories of the previous evening rush back in a dizzying wave, and a single, panicked thought echoes in her mind. Last night. Zhen's eyes flutter open, and she slowly becomes aware of the warmth beside her. A soft rustle of movement draws her attention. She turns her head, and her breath hitches in her throat. Jiang An is there, lying so close that she can see the faint red tinge in his grayish eyes. He watches her through a veil of her own dark hair. A quiet, almost automatic mourning escapes her lips. The air between them feels heavy, charged with an unspoken intensity as his unwavering gaze meets hers in the silent room. Jiang An's soft voice breaks the charged silence. He asks if she's sobered up, if her head hurts. For a long moment, they just stare, lips almost touching. Suddenly, the reality of their position crashes down on them. Zhen finds herself sitting across his lap, her shirt undone. A hot blush creeps up Jiang An's neck as he looks up at her, completely flustered. She stretches languidly, a hazy memory flickering behind her amber eyes. "Last night," she murmurs, the words hanging in the heated air. Jiang An's face flushes, his heart hammering as he questions what happened last night. He worries, wondering if he really lost control. But the memory that surfaces is far from what he imagines. Instead, he sees Zhen desperately trying to wake his unresponsive form, calling his name. She struggles with his dead weight, crying out as he slumps against her. In her memory, he clings like an octopus, trapping her in his heavy, unconscious embrace as she demands he let her go, completely exasperated by his clinging. A single tear slips from Jiang An's closed eye, falling onto Zhen's shoulder. His face, etched with vulnerability, presses into her as he sleeps. "Don't," he murmurs, his voice a fragile whisper lost in a dream. His hand clenches her clothing, a desperate anchor in a storm she can't see. "Don't leave me." Zhen sits frozen on the floor, her body rigid against the sofa. Her wide amber eyes are filled with shock as she stares down at the man clinging to her, completely bewildered by his sudden, pleading vulnerability. Lying awake, Zhen's mind races. She resolves to ask Jiang An about their relationship tomorrow, but doubt immediately follows. Even if he is the one she's looking for, he's too stubborn to admit it. She needs a way to break through his defenses. The morning light filters in, finding them both on the floor. The air is thick with unspoken questions. "What exactly did we do last night?" she finally asks, her voice hesitant. Jiang An looks up at her, a faint, knowing smirk on his lips. "What do you think?" he counters softly. Her eyes go wide, her heart hammering against her ribs. "What did we do?" she repeats, the words catching in her throat as her imagination runs wild. A faint blush dusts Jiang An's cheeks as he looks away, his composure cracking. "I'm sorry," he says, his voice low and serious. "I'll take responsibility. You can ask for any kind of compensation." A subtle, knowing smile touches Zhen's lips. Her expression shifts, becoming sharp and focused. "Responsibility?" she questions, her amber eyes locking onto his. Jiang An, in your eyes, am I just someone you need to take responsibility for? His head snaps up, surprise and alarm flashing in his eyes. You? He stammers, suddenly wondering if she knows more than she's letting on. Yizhen's voice is a low, deliberate whisper. Last night, she begins, her eyes searching his. You called my name. Many times. The words hang between them, intimate and heavy. Jiang An's expression tightens, his gaze fixed on her. She presses on, her hands gripping his jacket, weaving fabricated memories of him reminiscing about their past, shopping trips, movies, long talks. His stunned silence is all the confirmation she needs. He doesn't deny it. A flicker of triumph crosses her face as she adds a final detail, a fantasy about a shared kitten, watching his resolve crumble. A sudden jolt runs through Jiang An. His eyes widen in panic as he grabs Yizhen's shoulders, his grip tight. Wait, you're allergic to cats, he blurts out. Why would I take you to a cat cafe? The realization washes over him, a look of betrayal on his face. You tricked me, he asks, his voice dropping. Nothing happened between us last night, did it? A slow, triumphant smile spreads across Yizhen's lips. She has him cornered. You said you didn't know me, she counters, her voice a victorious whisper. So how did you know I'm allergic to cats? Jiang An's gaze remains steady, explaining that she herself mentioned their connection during a prior visit to the store. But his explanation doesn't sit right with Yizhen. In a swift, decisive motion, she closes the distance, pressing him back until he has nowhere to go. Her hand grips his jacket, their faces just inches apart. The air grows thick with unspoken questions as she confronts him with his own contradictory words, reminding him that he once claimed they had never met. The heat between them builds, her heart pounding against the sudden, charged silence. A faint smirk touches Jiang An's lips as a quiet laugh escapes him. He finds her persistence amusing. Realizing her direct approach isn't working, Yizhen's strategy shifts. Her hands release their grip on his jacket, and she stands up, creating a new kind of distance. The intense energy between them changes, softening into a quiet hum. I'm sorry, she says, her voice now gentle. Did I startle you just now? Am I being annoying? Jiang An looks up, his expression unreadable as he takes in her sudden change. No, he begins slowly, actually. Yizhen's thoughts spiral into a familiar despair. She feels like a fool, reflecting on how every storm forces her to rely on a diary just to remember herself. The moment she wakes up, she's the only one trapped in the past, alone and unknowing. A vision fills her mind, a tiny version of herself sliding helplessly down a giant screen in the pouring rain. A cold, crushing weight settles in her heart as she wonders how long she can endure this endless cycle of fear, questioning what her future will even look like. Yizhen looks up at Jiang An, her voice laced with desperation. She imagines a future where she's old and gray, yet a single storm still forces her to rebuild her life from cold, hard words. I've had enough, she breathes, the fight leaving her. Her head bows in defeat as she admits she sees no point in continuing this empty existence. A wave of shock washes over Jiang An's features. Her despair hits him like a physical blow, his composure cracking. The atmosphere shifts, and suddenly his eyes glow with a sorrowful red tinge as he gazes at her. A sharp breath cuts through Yizhen's despair, replaced by a cold, sudden resolve. She looks up, her eyes locking onto Jiang An as she admits she has her own theories about her condition. A painful memory flashes in her mind, her friend's warnings about a terrible relationship. The accusation hangs between them, sharp as shattering glass. She asks if he is the irresponsible man from her past. The air grows thick and heavy. Jiang An stands completely still, his stunned expression the only answer as a profound silence fills the room. The tense silence shatters as Jiang An abruptly doubles over, a rough cough escaping him. Seeing his flustered reaction is all the confirmation Yizhen needs. Her mind races with accusations, labeling him a two-timer, a scoundrel. She presses him, her voice in his head demanding to know if he is lying to her. Panicked, Jiang An stammers an excuse about the bookstore opening before turning to flee. He wonders who could have told her such nonsense. The scene then shifts to a memory of a man just like him, standing alone under a sunlit tree. A memory surfaces. Jiang An, from a time before, stands alone, his heart heavy. He believes his life has no point. But a voice, bright and full of conviction, slices through his despair. It's Yizhen from the past, insisting his life is not meaningless. She declares that him being able to get away holds the greatest meaning of all. The vivid memory jolts him back to the present. He stands frozen before the bookstore, then turns sharply. "Yizhen," he whispers, another vision filling his mind, her brilliant, smiling face as she waved goodbye. A memory floods Jiang An's mind, his heart heavy with a painful acceptance. He tells himself it's okay if she forgets him, again and again. Shaking off the thought, he steps into his bookstore, his expression distant. An employee greets him, noting his lateness, but Jiang An barely seems to hear. His focus is singular. "Boss?" the employee asks, trying to get his attention. Jiang An finally looks at him, his voice low and firm. He gives a simple order. If Miss Yi comes by, he must be told immediately. The command hangs in the air, underscored by a vision of her face. The city air is still as birds glide between stark buildings and power lines. Yizhen walks alone down the sidewalk, passing a small family without a glance. A crumpled piece of paper tumbles along the ground with her steps. The wind gently lifts her long, dark hair as she moves forward, her amber-brown eyes fixed on something unseen ahead. Her expression is pensive, lost in a world of thought, as distant and quiet as the birds resting silently on a wire against the pale sky. A faint sound cuts through the quiet, pulling Yizhen from her thoughts. She stops, her long hair drifting as she turns toward the soft meow. Her gaze lands on a lone cardboard box abandoned on the pavement. The flaps suddenly rustle. A small, calico cat with wide, soulful eyes peeks its head out, looking directly at her. The unexpected connection hangs in the cool air, a silent plea that stills Yizhen's wandering mind and captures her full attention in the lonely alley. Yizhen's breath hitches. "Hey, a little cat?" she whispers, her usual composure completely vanishing. An overwhelming warmth rushes through her, a desperate need to get closer. She leans over the box, her mind singularly focused, chanting, "Little kitty, let me pet you." The cat lets out a tiny meow and shrinks back as her hand approaches. Undeterred, her expression shifts to one of intense determination. She quickly dons a face mask and pristine white gloves, now fully equipped and ready to earn the creature's trust. Her heart thumps as she slowly extends a gloved hand. The calico sniffs her fingers, then leans into her touch, a wave of warmth rushing through Yizhen. "So cute," she thinks, completely captivated as she gently pets its soft fur. She's lost in the moment, cooing internally over the beautiful little creature. Her blissful trance is shattered when a sudden, loud sneeze escapes her. The cat flinches away, its small body trembling as it stares up at her, the fragile trust broken in an instant. A news report flashes across a city screen, warning of a severe cold front approaching. Yizhen's gaze, however, is fixed on the tiny calico cat. "It's going to be so cold tonight," she murmurs, her heart aching with worry for the little creature. "How will you get through it?" A wave of protectiveness washes over her as she begins to shrug off her own warm coat. Suddenly, a quiet, firm voice cuts through the air. "You'll catch a cold like this." She freezes, turning to find Jiang An standing nearby, his gaze locked on her. Yizhen looks up, her breath catching as Jiang An approaches, a soft pink pet bed in his hand. "Jiang An, what are you?" she asks, her voice barely a whisper. His presence seems to fill the narrow space between the buildings, a sudden warmth in the cold night air. He calmly explains this alley is just behind his bookstore. A spark of defiance lights her eyes. "You must have some sharp ears," she says, a slight challenge in her tone. He looks away, a subtle tension in his jaw, explaining the cats sometimes attract customers. The space between them crackles with unspoken tension. Yizhen leans in, her eyes sharp above her mask. "I pass by your bookstore every day after work," she says, her voice low. "How come I've never seen these female customers?" Jiang An stiffens, looking away as he insists they'll show up eventually. Later, at a veterinary clinic, a doctor confirms the cat is pregnant. As he speaks, the small animal suddenly cries out, lashing its claws across Jiang An's forearm. Without a second thought, Yizhen grabs his wrist, her earlier challenge forgotten. "Doctor!" she exclaims, her voice tight with worry. Yizhen's sharp words cut through the air. "Thanks a lot," she says, dismissing the doctor's previous comments. Her focus is solely on Jiang An now. She pulls him forward, her voice tight with urgency. "Hurry up, we need to treat that scratch right away." Jiang An looks down, his expression unreadable, but a faint, almost imperceptible smile touches his lips as he watches her fuss over him. Across the room, the doctor leans back, a knowing glint in his eyes as he takes in the scene before him. As Zhen carefully cleans the scratches on Jiang An's arm, he watches her with an intense gaze. He admits he's not a professional, but she just tells him to let her know if it hurts. While reminding him to get a vaccine, her thoughts drift to someone else, her voice trailing off. Jiang An, however, isn't listening to her words. A soft, captivated smile touches his lips as he gazes at her. She notices his distraction. Boss Jiang. In a sudden, fluid motion, he closes the space between them. His hand meets the wall beside her head. Zhen gasps, her eyes wide as he looms over her, the air crackling with sudden heat. A faint blush dusts Jiang An's cheeks as he whispers, "I heard you." Internally, he fights a rising warmth, knowing he can't get attached. A memory flashes, a dark room, a wall of interconnected data, a pressing deadline. It's time, he realizes. Snapping back to the present, Jiang An abruptly stands and catches Zhen's hand, his touch firm. "That's enough," he states, his voice devoid of its earlier softness. Startled by the sudden shift, Zhen looks up, insisting, "It's just a small injury." The vet confirms the paperwork is done and the kitten will stay for observation. As Jiang An turns to pay the fee, a small card slips from his back pocket, fluttering to the ground. Zhen spots it and picks it up. "Boss Jiang," she calls out, holding the dining card. "You dropped this." The vet peers over her shoulder and grins, teasingly remarking that he knows the place and that Jiang An used to go on dates there often. A faint blush colors Jiang An's cheeks as he quickly shushes his friend, telling him he knows too much. A warm blush spreads across Zhen's cheeks as she glances at the map on her phone, the vet's words echoing in her mind. The thought sends a flutter through her chest. She turns, offering Jiang An a bright wave and a smile. "I'll be going this way. Bye-bye." Jiang An watches her walk away, his expression unreadable. Once she's out of sight, he raises his phone to his ear. "Fortunately, you remain as persistent and curious as always," he says into the receiver, his voice cold and calculating. One bait is all it takes. With a sense of purpose, Zhen follows the map on her phone until she arrives at a small establishment with a wooden sign reading Moon. The moment she steps inside, the air feels warm and familiar. A woman behind the counter looks up, her face breaking into a wide, surprised smile. "Oh my, you haven't been here for a long time," she exclaims. A jolt of recognition courses through Zhen. "Yes," she confirms, a soft heat rising in her cheeks. "I used to always come with Jiang An, the tall one." The woman nods eagerly. The shop owner advises Zhen to let the past go, but the words only ignite a spark of certainty within her. The realization hits her hard. Jiang An was her former partner. Her resolve hardens, and she discreetly starts recording on her phone. She asks the owner why he would suddenly leave when things seemed fine. In a brief flash, Jiang An is seen on a call, instructing the owner what to say. Following his script, the woman explains that he used to bring many different women, not just one or two. The shop owner leans closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. She confesses that she's wanted to say this for a long time, that Jiang An used to bring other women here, even while they were together. The words strike Zhen like a physical blow. Her amber eyes widen in disbelief, her mind screaming. The owner places comforting hands on Zhen's trembling shoulders, explaining she didn't dare say anything before. As Zhen's head hangs low, a devastating new theory forms. Perhaps the shock of his betrayal is what truly shattered her memories. From a distance, Jiang An calmly reviews his file, dictating the owner's every word, even false concern over Zhen's weight. The scene dissolves into a painful memory, a moment where she begged him to disappear from her life. Now, the world around them fractures like broken glass. A single name escapes his lips in a pained whisper. Zhen. Utterly devastated by the fabricated betrayal, Zhen clutches her collar. Her voice is a fragile whisper as she questions everything. "Is this the truth, Jiang An?" In a sterile, high-tech office, a man stares at his monitor, where the image of a fractured butterfly glows. The scene shifts, fading into Zhen's conflicting memories of Jiang An. She struggles to understand him, her heart pulled in different directions. She recalls how gentle he is with the kittens, a warmth blooming in her chest at the memory. But then she wonders how that same man can be so mean to people. The warmth turns cold as another thought surfaces. He has brought other girls here before, not just one or two. At her desk, Yijin questions if Jiang An's gentleness is just another facade. Her thoughts scatter as her phone rings, piercing the office quiet. It's a call from the vet with wonderful news. The kitten's owner has been found. A bright, relieved smile spreads across her face. But her warmth fades when the caller asks if she and Mr. Jiang can meet the owner tonight. A jolt runs through her. This is her chance. Yes, I'll come over, she replies, her resolve hardening. It's time to face him directly. Yizhen presses a hand to the cool glass door, her breath catching in her throat. Inside, the kitten's owner stands incredibly close to Jiang An, their face alight with adoration. They explain how Jiang An found them distraught in the bookstore over their lost pet and immediately offered his help. Listening to them praise him, a hot flush creeps up Yizhen's neck. Jiang An then smoothly suggests they become friends online to stay in touch about the cat. A cold certainty settles in her chest. It's just that easy for him. The owner's voice is bright, eagerly offering to treat Jiang An to a meal as thanks. The warmth in the room suddenly feels suffocating. Yizhen turns away from the scene, her own heartbeat thumping loud in her ears. A man's voice cuts through the haze, calling out for Miss Yi. It's the veterinarian, his expression curious. Before she can respond, the cat's owner is in front of her, their face alight with gratitude. You must be one of the rescuers, they say. You're welcome, Yizhen murmurs, the words feeling hollow. The veterinarian advises the owner that a leash would prevent the kitten from getting lost again. As Jiang An helps fasten a small harness around the pet, his gaze is sharp and unreadable. For a fleeting moment, his eyes, tinged with red, flick towards Yizhen. A subtle, knowing smirk plays on his lips, and the air between them grows heavy. A polite, practiced smile finds its way onto Yizhen's face. She offers a quiet congratulations on finding the kitten, the words feeling empty as they leave her lips. Flustered, Yizhen stammers that she has something else to do and quickly escapes the clinic, her heart pounding. She doesn't see the woman who claimed the kitten lean close to Jiang An, their arms linked. In a low voice, the woman reminds him she's only here playing a part because he once helped her with a troublesome pursuer. Later, surrounded by scattered papers in a sunlit room, Yizhen's mind races. She scribbles in her notebook, connecting the dots. Jiang An, she thinks. He's familiar with my situation and knows I have allergies. Her heart hammers against her ribs. Jiang An alleged former police officer. The realization crashes over her as she connects him to the man she's been searching for. A wave of heat washes through her as a painful memory surfaces, being deceived over and over. Hot tears trace paths down her cheeks. Could his betrayal be the true cause of her lost memories? The thought feels like a cruel joke. Overwhelmed, she buries her face in her arm just as her phone buzzes. A call from Chun Lang, piercing the suffocating silence. Yizhen answers the phone, her expression drained. On the other end, Chun Lang stands on a sun-drenched basketball court, a hopeful energy radiating from him. He apologizes for bothering her, explaining that he got her number from Ms. Jiang. With a nervous flutter in his chest, he invites her to his competition this weekend. The word tired echoes in her mind, a heavy weight. Sensing her hesitation, he quickly stammers an apology, worried he was being too presumptuous. But looking at the chaos of crumpled notes around her, Yizhen softly agrees. Okay, I'll go. The air on the court crackles with intensity as players shout for a return to defense. A determined player named Chun Lang weaves past his opponent, his eyes locked on the basket. From the sidelines, a voice cries out, "Stop him." In the bleachers, a woman watches the scene unfold, her expression lost in thought. She knows they have the truth, but a nagging feeling persists. Something crucial is still missing. Her gaze fixes on Chun Lang as he leaps, soaring through the air for a final, decisive shot that hangs suspended in the moment. The basketball cuts cleanly through the net. Victory! The gymnasium erupts in a deafening roar as the crowd jumps to its feet. We won, they chant, their voices echoing off the walls. Down on the court, amidst a shower of celebratory confetti, Chun Lang flashes a brilliant smile and raises a hand toward the stands. A girl beside Yizhen gasps. He's looking over here. A soft, gentle smile graces Yizhen's lips. She lifts a hand in a slow wave, a quiet warmth blooming inside her as she takes in their exhilarating energy. After the game, Chun Lang chugs his drink, a relieved sigh escaping him as he dries his hair. He bounces over to Yizhen, his energy infectious, and asks how he played. A warm smile plays on her lips as she praises his impressive final shot. teasingly calling him the best little puppy. A blush creeps up his neck as he stands before her, insisting her support was his only motivation. "I'll treat you to a meal," he offers, his gaze intense. She chuckles softly, questioning his logic. "I should be treating you," she replies. "Congratulations on the win." He leans closer, his voice a low murmur, insisting anyone can treat. What truly matters to him is being with her. A blush creeps up his neck as he gets flustered, exclaiming how rare it is for them to eat out together. Later, they walk side by side down a street, bathed in the warm glow of sunset. As the light dances around them, Yizhen's expression becomes distant. A quiet, certain thought echoes in her mind. Her trance is shattered when a man stumbles while running, careening directly towards her as a voice shouts a frantic warning. A strong hand suddenly clasps Yizhen's wrist, yanking her back as a voice warns, "Careful." She stumbles into a firm chest, a protective arm instantly securing her. Her breath catches as she looks up into the concerned gray eyes of Jiang An. He holds her close against the backdrop of the setting sun. The man who nearly fell offers a flustered apology. Yizhen is acutely aware of Jiang An's hand still linked with hers, a gentle warmth spreading through her. It's fine now," she murmurs, her voice soft. A soft laugh escapes Yizhen, and Jiang An's expression immediately softens. "You finally laughed," he says, his hand gently brushing through her hair as he asks if the basketball game was boring for her. Suddenly flustered, Yizhen presses a hand against his chest, her heart fluttering. She insists the game was amazing and that he played exceptionally well, especially his incredible final shot. A warm blush creeps up Jiang An's neck at her praise. He asks what she called that last move, and she beams, exclaiming, Save the day?" Caught up in her praise, Jiang An's joy overflows. He impulsively grabs Yizhen's hand, pulling her into a run down the sun-warmed street. He stops short, suddenly flustered. "I'm sorry, I forgot," he says. Yizhen just leans against him with a peaceful smile, completely content. "It's okay," he murmurs, his expression softening as he looks down at her. "You're just too happy." He gently pulls his hand away and points ahead, suggesting a restaurant. But as he does, his cheerful expression vanishes, replaced by a somber shadow. They settle at an outdoor table at a cozy cafe, the evening light casting a warm glow. A gentle blush still on his cheeks, Jiang An tells Yizhen to order whatever she wants, insisting she's the star of the day. Her heart flutters at his words, but she smiles softly, saying she wants to try what he usually likes to eat instead. Suddenly, a large shadow falls over their table, chilling the warm air. The smile vanishes from Yizhen's face as she looks up, her gaze fixed on the building across the street. In the window's reflection, a solitary, imposing figure in a long coat stands watching them. And that's where we'll leave them, for now. If this one hit you right, you already know the move, tap subscribe. The next obsession drops twice a week, and trust me, you don't want to miss it. I pulled 2 more recaps just for you. They're on your screen right now. Pick your poison. This was Manhwa Dragon. Stay obsessed. I'll see you in the next one.